Look at all this. It's so many. Oh gosh, I'm falling over it. It's everywhere. RockWol.
So let's start here. How do you insulate an A-frame house in Canyon Lake, Texas? So when it comes to insulating a house, there's really two options. Number one, you can go with spray foam, or two, you can go with batt insulation. Personally, I did not want to go with spray foam. Here's why. I would be using the DIY spray foam kits that you get from the big stores. Now, if you were to mix those kits incorrectly, very bad things could happen. So for me, that made choosing batt insulation an absolute no-brainer. And that's why this video is sponsored by RockWol. I'm so excited to be working with RockWol in this video. I've been a fan of theirs for such a long time, ever since I first heard of the product. The product's really cool, has a lot of benefits, and it works very well for insulating your home, especially for DIYers like us. Now, here is how I installed the RockWol batts. So the first thing I did was go out and buy a serrated blade insulation knife. These knives are specifically made for cutting insulation, and they make the job really easy. You wouldn't want to cut these insulation batts with just a pocket knife because it wouldn't really do the job well. Now, as far as installing the RockWol batts within the wall cavity, if the space in between the framing studs was standard, so 14.5 to 22.5 inches, I was able to easily sit the batts in place. Now, in other places where the framing was a little atypical, I simply held the batts in place to the framing and cut them with the serrated blade insulation knife to fit perfectly within the wall cavity. So here's some benefits of RockWol. So RockWol's long-term performance has been studied, and more than 50 years after the installation of RockWol, it actually provides the same R-value, properties, and performance characters as it did on day one. From an insulation perspective, it handles easy, it stays firm in place, it doesn't slump in the wall cavity, which is a really big deal when you have an A-frame and the wall is literally slanting in. Now, one of the other benefits that I like is the energy efficiency here. So it's actually a highly sustainable product made from natural recycled materials. So as far as the fire protection goes, when it comes to RockWol's batt insulation, so RockWol's actually made from stone, so it's non-combustible. So you get passive fire protection built into the core of your home. So it's really preventing flame spread in the event of a fire and protecting escape routes, allowing more time to escape if that were to happen. Another benefit of the RockWol batt insulation is that it has sound dampening properties. So it just means that you're creating a quieter home and environment for everyone that's in the house because the insulation's so thick. Which is sweet when you're visiting an A-frame like this with a beautiful view. Gives you a lot of peace of mind. So there's a couple of other things that I did to help insulate the house. So number one, I'm sure you guys have heard of a flash and batt system. For you guys that haven't, so a traditional flash and batt system requires 2 inches of closed cell spray foam to be sprayed on the underside of the roof, and then you apply your batt insulation after the spray foam. Now, in between each piece of sheathing, is about a 1/8 inch gap. So in order to reduce air leakage and reduce the chance of fire spreading up and through the rafters, what I did was use a canned closed cell spray foam. You can get it from the box stores. And I sprayed in between that 1/8 inch gap to act as a backup air seal and simultaneously fill the void between the sheathing. Now here's the really big thing. So when it comes to insulating your house, you really have to think about airflow. And so most traditional houses, probably the house that you're in right now, if you walk outside and you look on the side of your house, you'll probably see a lot of soffit vents. So right now, if you were to walk outside of your house, look up at where the roof begins, where you have the soffit butting out, you'll see some soffit vents, which is allowing hot air to seep in to that opening there. And if you back up further and look at the very top of your house, you'll probably see a ridge vent, which is an additional piece of roofing sitting on the roofing tabs that's allowing hot air to escape to outside of the house. Now, because the A-frame pitch is very steep, it's a 1812 pitch, a ridge vent wouldn't quite work for me. It's a little too steep for most manufacturers to say they're comfortable putting their ridge vent on top of an A-frame house. So I went with a different system entirely. The entire house will be closed top to bottom. And so I went with what's called a conditioned attic space. Now, when you have an entirely closed space, you could get water vapor becoming an issue that could turn into mold. So what I did to prevent that, I had my roofer install what's called a vapor diffusion port at the very top of the ridge to prevent air from moving into the house to begin with. The vapor diffusion port does allow water vapor to leave through the roof of the house. So I did that to significantly reduce the chance of mold growth and to keep the house safe. One way to build a vapor diffusion port is to frame the roof conventionally all the way up to the ridge vent, and then you leave a small gap at the top of your roof, but you seal that opening with an airtight, watertight, vapor open house wrap, which I had my roofers do. So that way, if there is any water vapor within the house, it can just simply float up and out. So the other thing I'm doing to help with humidity in the house and water vapor is adding 2 ERVs, energy recovery ventilators, into the house to suck out any of that air. I'll show you guys that in a future video. Now, the last thing when it comes to insulating is that you have the stack effect you have to deal with, especially in 2-story homes, and especially this one because it's basically an attic. So in order to reduce the stack effect, which is another way to explain heat rising from the first floor up to the second floor, what I'll do is add additional RockWol bats on the underside of the second floor to slow the transfer of heat to the second story. All right, I want to show you guys something. So I have bats pretty much along the wall right here. I got a little spot down here I need to do, but I have bats along this part of the cavity so far. And of course the other bay is empty. So let me show you something. I take my temperature gun, and if I point it at the wall over here, it's 105. If I turn it to, look at that, where the bats are, 80 degrees. So from over here at 103, 104 to literally 82. That's crazy. So more than a 20-degree difference so far with the bats. That's awesome. That lets me know that my future guest will be extremely comfortable here at the A-Frame for Airbnb in Canyon Lake, Texas. I want to say thank you again to RockWol for sponsoring this video, and to all of my future guests, I can't wait until you're here. See you guys.